Thank you. Thank you very much for being here today. I really appreciate it. I thank you, Jonathan, who's not here, but anyway, he made a nice connection about the importance of Latino students and how they feel and how they're perceived. And myself, I'm from Uruguay, so I do have an accent. And there's always this sense of not belonging or belonging to a certain degree. But anyway, the presentation, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the demographics of the United States, demographics of the Idaho, which is the state that I conducted this study, the rationale, the purpose and reason for the study, and the study, the findings, and the conclusion. So in the United States, there are in 2022, there's a total number of 49.6 million students enrolled in public schools. And of that number, 22.1 million were white and 14.4 million were Latinx. And there are other groups, but I'm not covering them. So I'm just focusing on the Latinx population, and I call it Latinx instead of Latinos, because it's a term that helps bring together several nationalities represented in the United States. Moreover, of the 3.1 million public schools, 80% of them are white and 9% are Latinx. So as you can see from the percentage and the data, that there's really a disproportion of the representation of the teachers. For example, 9% of the public school educators were Latinx compared with 28% of the students. This doesn't exclude the sense that non-Latinx teachers can understand and learn how to work with Latinx students. But this is the purpose of my study. How do we engage other teachers to really understand the experiences and the knowledge and the wealth of knowledge that these students bring into the community? So furthermore, the public school students who were emergent bilinguals, and I don't call them ELL or ESL students, but I acknowledge that these students that their bilingualism will develop through schooling in the United States was 5.3 million or 20.6% of the population. And Spanish is the home language most commonly reported by these students. Spanish was spoken by 4,023,289, and then followed by Arabic, Chinese, Vietnamese, Portuguese, and Russian. The stats in Idaho really mirror the demographics of the United States. Latinx students made up 19% of the population, public school students. 7% were emergent bilinguals, and 81% spoke Spanish in their home, yet only 3% of the teachers were Latinx. The growth in the number of emergent bilinguals in the United States, coupled with a short of highly qualified teachers, is one of the most pressing issues in public education. Between 2019 and 2021, the Idaho experienced a 1.2 increase in the K-12 population, and the emergent bilinguals increased by 24%. And Idaho is going to have the largest increase in the United States of K-12 students enrollment, and 11% increase in the next 10 years. So obviously there is a strong need for teachers to be prepared to work with these students. Even though they have a lot of alternative authorizations to get a degree in Idaho and emergency provisional certificates, Idaho 5-year teacher retention rate is very low. 63% of the teachers stay in the job. While teacher salary remains among the lowest 10 in the nation. And Idaho teacher population is aging. The age group of 30 or younger is growing more slowly than in previous years. So why the study? I focused in order to improve the educational experiences of emergent students. We need to develop cooperation among teachers in schools. And it is paramount that teachers view the communities where the children live along the home context as a source of cultural wealth. Community cultural wealth, developed by GIOSO, aims to identify the cultural knowledge, skills, networks, and abilities developed by the students, the families, and the community members to, I quote, transform and empower people of color. Community cultural wealth changes the interpretation of Bourdieu's cultural capital theory by highlighting the failure to account for the knowledge, abilities, skills, contexts that communities of colors have and use to survive and resist the oppressions felt at the macro and micro level in the whole educational system and in the social system. Uncovering the white privilege embedded in these misrepresentations of cultural and social capital, he also outlines cultural knowledge, skills, networks, and abilities developed by Latinx students and their parents. Rather than viewing this as deficits, they are viewed as a wealth and as an asset for them to be able to make it through the system, and specifically the schooling system. And the other framework that I use is the fans of knowledge. It refers to the idea that children bring diverse backgrounds, knowledge gained from the family and communities to the classroom. And what teachers did in the fans of knowledge theory offers a way of bringing all of that knowledge into the classroom and creating curriculum to support students. The research the study that I'm going to be presenting is based on a much larger research. I had a 5-year OELA, Office of English Language Acquisition grant for 2.5 million years before this administration. It ended in 2021. There were 150 graduate students where required teachers to come back and get their endorsement in multilingual education or bilingual education. And so the study focuses on the narratives that students wrote of 24 teachers. What I did is collected the narratives that students wrote in an assignment of one of the courses. It was called Child Community and Context Study. And in this assignment, teachers were asked to really go and embed themselves in the community, in the families. Communities, I asked the students to go out and really get a sense of where they lived, where they had an importance of what they saw, what they felt, the resources that they were there or the resources that were not there. For example, libraries, stores, how the housing looked, et cetera, et cetera. I also had them have conversations with focused children. They were to select 2 emerging bilingual students that they had to engage in conversations with them to learn about their experiences in the schools, and also to conduct home visits to these with these students. So what I did is I looked at the narratives that they wrote after all of this experience that was carried out throughout one semester of 24 teachers. And I analyzed it. Let me go back to my PowerPoint presentation here. I wanted to add that 90% of the teachers identified as females and 86% as white, and they have an average of about 7 years of teaching. And after in-depth familiarization with the theme, with the narrative, I conducted this study using the thematic analysis approach. While analyzing the data, I became aware of the ways teachers responded to their experiences by drawing on hidden funds of knowledge present in families, classrooms, and communities. I found that the categories aligned really well with the also community cultural capital as reflected by her work. So going back to this, we can talk more about it, but it was a really interesting experience for the teachers because many of them had never conducted home visits. They were very scared. They were outside of their comfort zone in a way. They were reaching out to parents that perhaps were using people to interpret the conversations, were using family members. They were community members involved, and there was a lot of learning experience for the teacher. The questions for the studies were, how did the CCS, the study inform educators' understanding of multilingual families, and how did these influence their interactions with students and family? So I wanted to find out if the impact of this study really shifted an understanding of who these multilingual families were, and then how did they shift their ways of working with them? So the findings, the narratives shed light on how teachers saw students, parents, and families persist despite their trying experiences at school. And as Jonathan was talking, and I have done a lot of research throughout the years on Latinx and people of color, there is this common theme that you hear students, parents, etc., talk about, like they were never pushed, they were never encouraged to move forward. They were always told, oh, you're not ready for school, you're not prepared for school, you're better off just getting a job, or it's going to be too difficult, you don't have the funds. And I started working with migrant educators back in the 80s. And I have conducted studies up to now with graduate students who are Latinx, and they continue to tell me the same stories. So things have changed, but they really haven't changed, because that narrative continues to be heard by these students, the lack of opportunities. And so while I used the community cultural wealth framework to analyze the data initially, my findings show the significance of these capitals. In the community cultural wealth, he also talks about aspirational capital, social capital, familiar capital, linguistic capital, navigational capital, and resistant capital. And I really focus on the aspiration, linguistic, and social capital as the most critical elements of the community cultural wealth among participants. The examples I selected most clearly represent how the community cultural wealth emerged in the lives of the families as they engage, and the families, meaning the parents and the students, and how these forms of capitals were really understood by teachers. So aspirational capital is the ability that Latinx parents bring that involves a parent's ability to maintain hopes and dreams for the future, even in the face of barriers to the educational path of their children. It involves parents' ability to inspire their children and to do better and achieve more than they have in their educational goals. Throughout the conversations, they heard a lot of the common thing was, I want my kid to go to college. I want them to get a degree. I don't want them to work in the fields. I want them to have the opportunity to work under a roof. So they were not just telling them what their aspirations were, but they were also sharing their own narrative, their own stories, their own life stories of what they had happened to them and why they were really persistent about their going and getting an education. Many of the teachers reported that they use examples of their own lives to talk to the children. And teachers share that many parents supported the idea that their children should achieve the highest degree possible, as their own educational experience were cut short. All of the information shifted, all of the narratives that they heard from the families shifted the ways teachers perceived their children and families' commitment to school. Many times you hear teachers, oh, they don't come to the conferences, parents don't care, Latinx parents don't care, they don't want to be here, they don't come to school. So this has really shifted their way of thinking. Teachers acknowledge that the myth that Latinx families do not care about education was dismantled through these experiences. Participants shared, the biggest thing I learned is that families and community members are likely more invested in my students' education than I realized. Another teacher said, families do not only care about education, they have a strong philosophy that is supportive of education, which, as one teacher mentioned, not only aligns with my ways of teaching, but also makes me aware of how it does. So the next one that I focused on was the linguistic capital. One of the biggest challenges students and families face in school is always language. I often think of students come to school all prepared to learn with a backpack full of knowledge, and yet they're asked to leave that backpack at the entrance of the school because they're asked not to speak English. They're asked not to be involved at all, bringing their knowledge to the table. And I found that teachers recognize the importance that language play in the lives of the students. I'm not going to read the quote, but you can read it for yourselves. In the sense that they realized that there was a lot of reasons why they were speaking Spanish with their students, not only to understood the foundation. If you know a language well enough, your first language, you'll learn the second language better. And we know that from many years of research. And also because the importance that they valued, that they communicated with all of the family members, that they learned their values, beliefs, ways of being. The next one is the social capital. Social capital is defined by the close networks of people and community families have in the history within these networks. Teachers' narrative had a common story. Students were encouraged and supported along the way. There was a lot of social capital in these communities. In Idaho, it's a very diverse community. They've been there before Idaho was declared a state. There's a diverse community of Peruvians, Guatemalans, Salvadorians, Hondurans, and they all have different dialects, different accents, and different community strength. And teachers recognize the importance of these communities, the interdependence that existed between these families, and how they could function together as a unique unit, that they were all supportive of each other, and they all learned from each other. There were neighbors that would take care of the other kids. There were community leaders that would go to the school visits, to the conferences. They were all pulling for each other. And that really shifted the way teachers understood the involvement of these parents in the community. So in my conclusion, for the teachers in the study, the opportunity to engage in conversations with the students and their families and community members was really critical in understanding the barriers families and students face in the various levels of the U.S. educational system, and even outside the community. Initially, teachers struggled with the idea of going out, recognizing that they were in a new territory, but they recognized this was a forever changing life experience for them. They understood how much value families placed in education and how much families were aligned with a commitment to help students succeed. This pushed teachers to really rethink the way that they were engaging with the students, how they learned all of those, the wealth that existed, those capitals, and they started bringing to school and shifted the way that they created curriculum or co-created curriculum with the families and community members. So here's one of the quotes that I'm not going to read. And then there is another quote that I really like. It says, everyone has a story. And if you're willing to take a moment and listen, it is amazing why we as humans beings go through each and every day. I have learned much more than just the requirements of the assignment, but a life lesson that people are truly amazing. And the students that walk through my door each year are gifts. As I look to the future and reflect back, find myself wanting to stay in touch with the families, students, and follow them along their educational journey. So to do the conclusions, I'm going to try to, maybe I need your help, play a video without voice that you can read as I play it. And I have a couple of minutes, so I think I'll make it. That I think is very powerful. We don't need the voice, but we can just view it. So what's next? And that's what I want to think about. Educators in rural and urban areas of the U.S. face tremendous challenges and issues as they strive to meet the needs of a growing emerging bilingual population. Unfortunately, the cuts imposed by the current administration may have an unforeseen impact on the educational communities. The current administration disseminated the Office of English Language Acquisition that supported me for the research, eliminating nearly 200 civil rights attorneys who make sure districts meet their legal obligation to support these students. Many see the removal of staff who oversees Title VII, which is a program that provides funding to states to support emerging bilinguals and immigrant students, will be used to block grants that they could be used without restrictions. I mean, and giving much more opportunities to all students instead of really focusing on the emerging bilinguals. Moreover, President Trump has expressed a desire to eliminate the education department and move core programs to other agencies. This will have a tremendous impact on essential funds and services to millions of students, including protected populations such as emerging bilinguals, who for the majority are U.S. citizens, representing 11% of the total K-12 school enrollment. Many teachers are sharing their concern about what is next because they're fully aware that multilingual specialist positions are federally funded, and if federal funds are cut, the position will be eliminated. Therefore, emerging bilinguals will receive less support. Teachers worry that these cuts will also impact the programs available for ABs, pushing them to be placed in a sink or swim situation, repeating the linguistic history that began during World War I era and lasted until the late 1960s. Thank you.
Any questions?